Welcome to Module 3, Adaptive Thinking. Before we start, let's just get present and tune in. So take a deep breath in and just scan the body from head to toe. And then just check in with the mind and just note what's there. Putting any worries or concerns aside and setting our intention to get present to adaptive thinking, understanding what it is and how we can apply it to our lives. Okay, so let's basically have a recap. Maybe you can start thinking about what you've taken on and what results you've got, and start celebrating those results, one small step at a time. So what we're going to look at in this module is what is adaptive thinking. We're going to get present to understand the ADHD brain. We're going to increase our awareness of thoughts and loops, these thought loops that we get into. And we're going to get present to the consequences of those thought loops and how to break them. And look at cognitive reconstructing and mindfulness as tools. So what is adaptive thinking? So this is a really good description of it. So adaptive thinking is the ability to recognize unexpected situations, quickly consider various possible responses, and decide on the best one, and is an essential ingredient in the ability to perform at high levels of mastery. So just get present to that. The ability to perform, it's the essential ingredients. So if we're looking at knowledge versus performance, and Dr. Russell Barkley points out that there's a defect in the performance, then adaptive thinking is something that we need to look at to see how we can learn it and apply it. So essentially, it's kind of our process to solve problems. And if we look at life in general, the greatest truth of life is that it is difficult. Life is difficult. Many people don't get present to that. They expect it to be smooth sailing all the time, but it's not. The greatest truth is that life is difficult. And the sooner we accept that, then it becomes no longer difficult. So the way life presents itself is a series of problems. One by one, things come up, and we have to deal with those. And some are expected, some are unexpected, these unexpected situations. And it's about how we deal with those, how we respond to them. And adaptive thinking is the essential ingredient in terms of like a recipe. It's in the recipe to be able to perform at high levels of mastery. So how do we look at what are the key elements of it? Well, number one is effective planning. So it's about thinking ahead and reviewing all the options available. Number two, it's about careful monitoring of progress. It's about checking back. I've put this change in place. Is it working? If it's not, maybe I need to change it. Review what works best and only focus on what works best. If you find something's not working for you, then adapt it. So pull it out, change it, do something different. Because you get what you get because you do what you do. Change what you do and you get something different. Third element, flexibility. So the ability to shift thinking and behavior to accommodate for these circumstantial changes is essential. If we become so rigid in our thinking and it has to be this way, reality, things aren't the way we really want them to be. So we have to have this element of flexibility in there. So let's just think a little bit for now to think about what currently holds you back to adaptive thinking. Just give you a moment to think about that. Okay, so sharing from my own life, I think a lot of what's held me back from adaptive thinking has been fear. Fear of failure, fear of what other people will think, fear of not being good enough, not quite making it. And I guess even now, having the diagnosis of ADHD, that can sometimes hold you back because we can think, oh, it's because ADHD, that's why. And then we just become resigned to the fact that I have an ADHD brain and I'm not going to be able to do it. That just is the way it is. This can hold you back because it's a story that you're telling yourself. Henry Ford said something very true. If you think that you can't, you can't. If you think you can, you can. So whatever you think is right, because we make our thoughts to be true when they're not. So let's understand the brain. Let's understand this ADHD brain, non-neurotypical brain. as described by the medical world. So it affects the executive function, we know that. But what is the executive function? Well, it's the general term for management and regulation and the control of cognitive processes. The executive system enables you to plan, make decisions, override responses, and correct these errors. So how does that work? Well, the executive function requires the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain, in order to function. Other parts must be activated as well. So as soon as if fear comes in, what that does is it shuts down the prefrontal cortex, so you don't have access to it. So the first thing you have to do is calm yourself down before even getting to any kind of stage of thinking what to do and how to respond. So it develops over time, this prefrontal cortex, via a non-linear growth spurts, and it reaches its peak during adulthood. So within the brain, there's two main parts. There's the old brain, the reptilian, and then the new brain competence, and that's the new brain is more to do with the prefrontal cortex. So the new brain is associated with imagination, planning, remuneration, worry, self-awareness, and the old brain is really just fighting to survive. It's all about survival. It's our motives to avoid pain. It's the emotions, the anger, the anxiety, the sadness, the joy, and it's the behaviors. There's this fight, flight, or submission. So it's this threat system. When there's a threat that comes in, remember going back to the savannah, and you're the deer in the savannah, and the lion comes along. What are you going to do? You're going to run? Are you going to freeze? We're going to fight. And this might be, you might spend most of your day in this mode. And if you are spending most of your day in this mode, because we don't live in the savannah, that's for sure, but we have these same things that are happening. These lions are coming in, which are mostly to do with other people and situations. And over time, it creates a lot of stress on the body. It drains you. Imagine you have to be constantly fighting all the time. It's going to take a lot of energy. And if you're running all the time, it's going to take a lot of energy. And even if you just submit and just freeze, then you're numb to what's going on around you. So all of it takes energy. Let's look at thoughts now and just increase our awareness of thoughts and what thoughts actually are. So from thoughts come actions, and from actions come all kinds of consequences. Mindfully understanding that thoughts are not facts, even the ones that say they are, helps us to see them clearly so we can choose which ones to act on. So thoughts are not facts. They are not part of you. They're like cloud formations in the sky. They're impermanent. They come and go. Not everything you say is true. Start investigating where they came from, because all thoughts are borrowed. And the brain naturally has a 3-to-1 ratio, negative to positive. This is for any brain, any human's brain. So we have to work hard, especially with those negative ones, because there's a 3-to-1 ratio. And you can think about this in terms of your day. If something good happened to you during the day, and let's say you had about 5 or 6 good things happen to you in that day, and then one bad thing happened. Someone said something, they upset you, one bad thing. So at the end of the day, what do you think about? Those 6 good things, or do you think about the one bad thing? We know the answer. That's why we're here. Myself included, by the way. I'm not immune to this. 60,000 thoughts a day. 95% of those thoughts are the same from the previous day, which leaves us with only 5% new and creative thoughts. That's if we're lucky. Tal Ben-Shahar, founder of positive psychology, course in Harvard. And some of those figures have been up to 80,000 or 18,000 a minute thoughts. It's a lot of thoughts. And most of them are the same. They're repetitive. We go over and over the same thing. So take a moment to ponder on what are your repetitive thoughts and how do they hinder your progression in life or with a task or just in general. Okay. So I can share from my life, I guess, is that repetitive thoughts are, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough to get the message out there? And it's continually going on and on and on and on. And it hinders my progression because sometimes I don't take the breaks that I need. And I'm wanting to do more and more and more and not having the breaks. And that hinders my progression because then it affects my health. Let's look at what is a thought loop. So a thought loop is defined as the experience of being trapped within a chain of thoughts, actions, and emotions which repeats itself over and over again. It's in a cyclic loop. These loops usually range from anywhere between 5 seconds and 2 minutes in length. However, some people have reported them to be up to 2 hours, a few hours in length. Taking our time out. Time is short. So let's look at what we kind of do in a scenario. I mean, social media now is can trigger off a lot of thought loops. If someone writes something on social media, so let's look at this this situation. It's very common especially in sort of young teenagers. They'll look on there and say Joe was not invited on to Lucy's birthday celebration. So she goes onto Facebook. She sees that all her friends are there having a good time at this party. So the new brain thinks, well, why didn't I get invited? And then the old brain starts heart racing, tense, muscles, anxiety. And then it goes into anger and self-directed anger. So the old brain. And then it goes into anger and envy. But if we look at the new brain, it will ask this question curiously, why didn't I get invited? And then it will go into maybe because I didn't send so-and-so a card. Then it might go into, I'm not a good friend, it's my fault. Or she knew why I didn't send a card because I've got loads of things going on in my life and she's so pretty. She doesn't need a card from me. So you can see both are going into thought loops, and the brain is going into the thought. The new brain is into this thought loop of trying to seek for a reason as to why, and then the old brain is connected to the body, and you can see that it's having an effect on the body. So what are the consequences? Love this image. I mean, we don't normally get steam coming from our ears, but sometimes it feels like that, doesn't it? So here are the actual consequences of these thought loops. Okay, it's apart from it just takes your time worrying about something. Frustration, anger, procrastination, delays in projects or life plans, decreases in your performance, negative effect on your well-being and health, it destroys relationships, lowers self-esteem, and it increases suffering. What have been the consequences of thought loops in your life? And just pick an example of a thought loop and share how it's impacted your life. Okay, so I can share one from my life, but in my intimate relationship is about trust. So there's been a continual thought loop. Can I trust him? Can I trust him? Can I trust him? Oh, has he done that? Done that? Can I trust him? That the consequences is that I didn't open my heart to trust someone. I let that thought loop, which was actually when I started to investigate it, came from childhood, my first relationships with men, and I basically had this belief that men could not be trusted, and that was showing up later on in life, and it just kept coming, and it's there and there and there until I was able to recognize it, where it's come from, investigate it, and then let it go, because it's not the reality of what's happening here and now. So it's a thought and it's not real, because I have no real justification not to trust my partner. And the consequences is it affects him, it affects me. He doesn't feel that he's good enough. He doesn't feel, he kind of makes you feel like you're not to be trusted. And trust is something that's essential in all relationships. So how to break free of these thought loops, okay? This is the burning question because we know that they're there. It's not about knowledge, it's about transformation. So, the first thing, we can't change what we're not aware of. So we must raise awareness on these thoughts. So you can keep a journal. You can use an app called the Thought Diary, and you can start putting these thoughts on trial. So there's a template in the resource section where you can put these thoughts on trial. And there's also a useful tool for adaptive thinking as well to look at all the thinking errors that come up. Because sometimes we tend to just jump to conclusions and it's not the reality of the situation. Hence, like the birthday party might be just that, the other person forgot, or they didn't have their number, or they didn't, there's a multitude of things that could be in the mix that's happened, but we're creating a story from it and we're believing it to be true. So ask questions. You can ask these questions. Is it true what I'm thinking? What evidence do I have for it to be true? Focus on the present. Observe it and let go. And start forming new habits. Develop positive thoughts and affirmations to reduce this insecurity in yourself. And be kind to yourself. We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. And this is why we're here on this course, is when we can raise that level up of training, then we can actually look at our expectations and our thoughts and say, are they real? Are they true? So the other thing we can do for adaptive thinking is look at this cognitive restructuring. So within the brain, we have these neurons that fire, and sometimes with ADHD, they're misfiring. So we're not actually making that connection. So to make the habit form, we have to do it. Some people say 21 days, 40 days, apparently, is to make a habit. So we've got to get present. We've got to get present to the types of automatic thinking that come in at play. We've got to recognize when a thought loop is happening, and going to develop mindfulness as a tool and understand the mind-body connection and get coaching through support groups like this one. So within the support in the resources section, there is a worksheet on all the different types of automatic thinking, so you can get present to what they are. Take a moment and just think, what are your current experiences with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy? Okay, so my experiences with CBT, I've had some therapy and looked at the computer system that government gives you, and also through a therapist, and it takes time. That's the conclusion I've come to it. You have to put the work in, because if you've got 80,000 thoughts a day, That's a lot of work. So you might pick one thing and change that belief, but you've got to constantly keep working on that belief every day, because we go back to our automatic thinking of the first thing. It's a natural thing. And the police say this in terms of accidents, is that we don't learn from our mistakes. You know, we can have near misses, but unless we really look into those near misses and we don't learn from them, we're going to do the same thing again. Hence, if we look at crimes that are committed, the reoffender rate is high. If that prisoner gets released and they go back into the same environment that they were in before, all the conditions are there for it to reoccur, and it happens. So it's exactly the same with us. So we can learn, we can go on a training course, and we can be on that training course and we can think, yeah, this is great. I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to put into practice. This is what I need. You go away. Monday morning comes, you're back at work. Training course gone out the window. So this is why Peter Drucker says, don't tell me what you've learned on the training course. Tell me what you're going to do differently, because that is the evidence of learning. A change in behavior is the only evidence of learning. Get this, the only evidence of learning is a change in behavior. So how does it work? CBT is looking at changing perceptions. So when we get born into this world, we don't have many perceptions about anything. And then we don't even have a perception about what our name is until one day our mother or father or caregiver says, oh, Sue, you're Sue. Looks you in the mirror. Sue. You Sue? Me Sue? Yeah, that's when you get the first realization that you are called Sue. You have no construction about what names are, just in the world. And then everything else gets a label. When we look at a bird, it's a bird, bird. If we look at tree, tree. If we look at house, house. Mum, mum. Dad, dad. All of these set precedences in our head as the perception, and it's the first one. It's our primal relationships or our primal experiences that set it for everything else in our life. So we have to go back. This is what the Chinese say. To understand the present, you have to go back into the past. So you've got to walk that road and find out what made you think that way. And is it relevant now to carry on thinking that way? Does it serve you or does it not? So the whole loop around it is CBT, is it's these thoughts, it's what we think affects how we feel and act, because that links into behaviors, because what we do affects how we think and feel. And then emotions is what we feel affects how we think and act. And it's constantly going round and round and round and round and round. 80,000 thoughts. So to restructure all of those thoughts, it's going to take time. So we have to break it down step by step. So you can start thinking about what are those limiting and self limiting beliefs that you currently hold and work on those ones first. So here's what a CBT session looks like, just to give you an insight.
I sat down to discuss the ins
How
and
you can
outs
do
of
it
how
is
that
you can do
therapy
it through
works
a
and how it can be
recognized
used to change your thoughts, your emotions, and ultimately your behaviors. And then we decided that we would do a mock therapy session with myself portraying somebody who has a cognitive belief, or what is it called?
Yeah,
again?
a certain kind of core belief.
Core belief,
Have.
yes. And you're going to walk me through that belief and show the viewers how CBT can actually bring them closer to the truth and closer to a more healthy way to think and react and behave when it comes to our emotions and thoughts. So my core belief in this mock therapy session is going to be that I feel like I'm unlovable by everybody. Right. That's my core belief. I feel like I'm pretty lovable by most people. Yeah. I'm sure not everybody.
This is not Kyle's actual core belief.
Right, exactly.
But you are playing a patient in which has that core belief, and I think it's a common core belief for people, whether they want to admit it or not.
That's right.
And it makes sense because it's one of our basic drives is to be loved by people. I mean, that's just a basic human drive.
Yeah.
And it's not just about emotional wellness that you feel loved. It's actually about physical survival. If you're not loved and nurtured, then you might die.
Right.
You know, your physical being will actually perish.
Right.
If you're not nurtured well, if you're not taken care of well. And so I think this is a good one for us to role play.
Cool. Well, this will be great for the viewers to see what a therapy session could be like and also how CBT is used. So I'll let you take it away.
Okay, great. So Kyle, what brings you in today?
I recently broke up with a long-term partner, and it's been one of many breakups I've had in my life. And at this point, I'm getting older. I have gray hair. I feel like the clock is ticking, and I don't feel like I will ever find somebody who loves me. I feel like I would have found him already. I feel like I've dated enough people to make that happen, and it's not happening, and I don't see anything changing, and my depression is through the roof because of it.
Okay, so I'm sorry about your breakup, and I'm sorry that kind of led to a cascade of thoughts in your head about what this really means about your future for relationships and about you ultimately. So we're gonna do a practice technique right now, and this technique is called laddering. And what this is gonna help us with is getting some of those negative automatic thoughts. I mean, you said many right now, actually, just in your description. We're gonna work with one of those. And it helps us to get them organized in a way so that you can actually see what that automatic thought leads to. Sort of like if you think about automatic thoughts being kind of like an iceberg, and the automatic thoughts is the tip of the iceberg that you can see above the water. It's conscious, but you have to kind of attune your awareness to it. But deeper thoughts are actually submerged. You can't see them. They're below the water level. And that's what we need to get to, because that's the crux of the issue. These core beliefs drive how you feel, how you think, and even the rules that you have in life about how you should behave in order to have safety in many ways. And so let's start with an automatic thought. I heard you say that you were thinking, based on this breakup and other ones, that I might never find somebody who will love me.
Yeah.
So let's work with that automatic thought. There were other ones, but I think this one is a good one to work with. So if your automatic thought is, I'm not going to find somebody who loves me, what might that mean? Like, what does that thought mean to you?
Well, I look around at my friends and my family who are in relationships, who are having kids, who are posting pictures, who are sending out Christmas cards with their significant others, and I don't feel like I will have that. I feel like while everyone else will have love in their life and meaning and purpose, I will have nothing. I will be alone, and I am alone, and I am also lonely.
Right.
And that is devastating.
So what might it mean if you were alone? Like, let's take that part of it. So, you know, you kind of broke it down like, well, I don't think that I'm going to find anybody to love me or who I'll love or who we'll have this relationship with. And to me, that means that I'll be alone. So what would it mean if you were alone? Like, what if that did happen? What would that mean about you?
Well, on one hand, it means that on one hand, it means that people wouldn't, if I'm alone, it means that people don't want to be with me, which is
Right.
awful.
It's an awful thought.
And it also means that I won't be able to enjoy life how I could. I will miss out on dinners and holidays and weekend trips and children and legacy and memories. There's a laundry list of consequences from being alone.
Right. And you had just said that one of the things that being alone means would be that maybe that means nobody wants to be with you. And so what would that thought mean if it was true? What if nobody wanted to be with you? What if that was an actual fact? Like, what would that mean?
That there's something wrong with me.
And if there is something wrong with you, if that thought was true, then what would that mean?
That I haven't done a good job in my life. I haven't done a good job becoming somebody that people want to be around.
Right.
That people want to be in a relationship with.
Right. And what would that mean about you if people didn't want to be in a relationship with you? That you haven't done a good job and people didn't want to be around you?
That I'm worthless, that I'm a waste of time.
Yeah. Well, that's the core belief. The core belief is I'm worthless, or sometimes people will say I'm unlovable. Sometimes they're interchangeable. But like, that's how we got to the core belief, is we keep doing this laddering technique where any negative thought you have, I ask you, what does that mean? If that thought was true, what would that mean about you? Okay, well, if that thought was true, that would mean that I would be alone. Okay, well, what would that mean if that was true, if you were alone? Well, that would mean that nobody would want to be around me. And you kind of kept breaking it down to like the deeper and deeper level until you got to this idea of that would mean that I was worthless, that maybe I'm just not capable of being loved, that I'm undeserving of love. And that's what we mean by a core belief, which is like a horrible thing to have to think about. And I want to be clear that core beliefs are not necessarily what you actually believe about yourself, but core beliefs are your biggest fear, meaning that if it was true, it would be devastating. If you truly were worthless, or if you truly were unlovable, that would be devastating.
I don't feel, if you would have asked me 3 minutes ago or 4 minutes ago, do you think you're a worthless person? I would have said no. Not at all.
Right. Yeah. And I think that when people first encounter what could be their core belief, they have that kind of reaction of, but I don't really believe it's true, at least not intellectually. But it's really about the fear of, man, but what if it was true? Like, what would that mean about my life and what I could even amount to, and what kind of legacy would I leave behind if that was true? And everybody has different fears for different reasons. Some people's core belief is, I'm incapable, and that to them is paralyzing. Like, man, if I was incapable, like that could ruin my life, And it's not that they actually believe they're incapable, but it's just like, oh my gosh, if that was true, the consequences to my life would be devastating, and I wouldn't even be able to tolerate it. And so this is sort of what we're working with. And I always say when we get to a core belief, it doesn't necessarily have to be your core belief, but let's work with it. Let's see if it is. Part of this is sort of like hypothesis testing. Like, let's work with that and see if that could be true for you.
Okay.
When people have core beliefs, they usually then have conditional rules and assumptions about how the world will work and how they should act within that world. So what I mean by this is, when you have such a core belief like I'm worthless or I'm unlovable, there will be certain things that you believe are scripts that you have to follow in order to have any semblance of emotional safety or to prevent yourself from having that core belief come true. And so we're going to talk about what some of those things could be for you. When somebody has a I'm worthless core belief, what might that do in terms of your expression of your needs and wants to other people? Like, what rule might you have if you actually believe that you might be worthless, or that you fear that that might be true? what kind of rule would you put on yourself in terms of how you could communicate your needs and wants to others?
Well, I would probably only, in terms of a romantic relationship, I would probably only date someone who I felt was like below my league, I guess. I don't know if that's a rude thing to say, but
no, it's honest, and I think you're not alone in that.
Because if I truly was worthless, then I would need to be with somebody else who couldn't see that, who would never know that I was worthless.
Right.
And so I would need to date accordingly.
Right.
I wouldn't go after the people that I actually wanted to date because they're too smart to figure it out.
Right.
That's at least I
that
think
would be
that's
like
what
a
happened.
possible thinking there.
Yeah,
definitely.
and I would also try to show my worth a lot, even though I believed I'm worthless. I would try to show, well, look at the great house I have, and look at how happy I'm being, and look how fun my friends are, and look at my cool job, and look at, see, I'm not worthless, I'm not worthless, I'm not worthless.
Right, yeah, no, those are excellent examples of the types of rules you might have when that is your core belief. And might you also have a type of rule where you felt like in certain situations you had to contribute something so that there would be worth? So like even in friendships, for example, like, how are you? Like always about them as opposed to, oh, now we can talk about me for 20 minutes.
Right.
Do you find yourself sometimes doing that with your friends?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm always, for as long as I can remember, constantly making sure that the other person was happy with our interaction first. Professionally, friendship, romantic, familial. Are you happy with our interaction? Constantly, I constantly remember thinking, are you happy about this? Because I want to make sure you're happy about this, because I don't want you to have an interaction with me where you're not happy.
Right, right. Okay. So again, another great example of a possible assumption or rule that you might put on yourself when this is the core belief. And so, as you might imagine, there's a long list of these. If we sat here for 2 hours, we could probably come up with like 20 other rules that probably play some role in your life. But I want to move on to the problem solving phase, because that's what CBT is all about, is like, let's solve the problem. So
I love that part.
So we've identified the issue, and there's been very many different ways in which you can work with your core beliefs, but you have to remember that these core beliefs have been there for a long time, and they're kind of pervasive. Like this idea of I'm worthless, as you just demonstrated, it's not just about your romantic relationships. It's about how you interact with friends, with professional people, with colleagues, whatever. There's permeating of sorts in almost all the domains of your life. And so what we're going to do now is one of my favorite ways to work with core beliefs and assumptions once we've identified them, and that is to create an individualized behavioral experiment.
Okay.
To try to see if your core beliefs and the assumptions that follow them actually apply to every single situation.
Okay.
As I mentioned, core beliefs feel pervasive, and we want to make them more conditional. We want to make it so that, well, in certain situations and with certain people, they may make me feel this way, and maybe that even comes from childhood, but it doesn't apply to every single thing, right? And the way that we shake that is to actually get evidence. CBT is a scientific program, and this is kind of like our mini science experiment that we're going to do together. So there's only a couple of rules for this experiment. We're going to design an experiment around one of your rules or assumptions, and the one that I want to use, which I think is a good one to do, because you want to start with a lower hanging fruit that's not too activating.
Okay.
Like we shouldn't start with the rule of you dating people who might be of a different level than you, because that one is a little bit deeper. But we start with something that feels like you can approach it and there's a little bit of risk. It makes you a little uncomfortable, but not like the worst thing that could happen. And I think that would apply to the rule of, I always have to take care of other people's needs first. Because there's a lot of people that applies to. It can apply to your intimate relationships, but it can also apply to friends, colleagues, anybody else that you meet. So let's take that rule and let's try to test it with a person in your life. And I would also say that, again, this person should not be the most activating person, but this should be a person who, there's some stakes in it, there's some skin in the game, but this is not a person in which, if this experiment failed, meaning that like you tried to challenge this assumption and they failed it in some way and actually made your core belief feel more significant to you that you would feel bad about it, but you wouldn't be so bad that you would be in pieces. So is there a person like that who you're like, like I've always taken care of this person's needs first, like as I usually do, and I could probably test something out with them, and if it didn't work out, I'd be kind of sad about it, but like I wouldn't be devastated.
Well, I have a friend in mind.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And so this is somebody that, how long have you known this friend?
10, more than 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, so 10 years.
Yeah, but
good.
we're not like everyday friends.
Right,
Yeah.
but you guys have been familiar
Right.
and like most of the times you're probably taking care of this friend.
Right.
How are you? Like, oh, let me give you advice. Like,
Right.
what can I bring you? You're sick. Like
Right.
that kind of relationship. All right. So this experiment is going to be very time limited. It's going to be very specific. So I need you to set like a specific date and time that you're going to do this in the next 7 days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was going to be real specific because we need to get that data. And it's going to be something that's kind of contained, meaning it should be something where it's not like a free-for-all, like from now on, I'm just going to be, word vomit and always tell them all about my problems first. But it's more about, okay, in this particular conversation, I'm going to go with him with the problem. And once I talk about the problem, get his advice, I'm going to be like, that was so helpful. Thank you. Goodbye. And not make that about him at all. Because that's the other thing where with your type of core belief and assumption, sometimes you'll be like, and how are you? And then you spend another 45 minutes dealing with them.
Absolutely.
So we're not going to do that. This is literally going to be you going to him to express a need of yours, to express a problem, have this person give you the advice, and then be like, thank you. That was super helpful. Talk to you later. So that's the experiment.
And I have to go do that.
And you have to go do that.
And then what are you expecting me to report back with?
So first we're going to predict how you think that's going to go. So based on your beliefs or maybe your assumptions and rules, like how do you think that might go? Like in terms of maybe how you might feel or what they might feel or do?
Well, I mean, I think it will go fine.
Okay. Do you think that he's going to have some kind of inner judgment of you? Like, Kyle's selfish? He didn't even ask about me today?
I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's get specific. I mean, do you think that that's a possibility?
Yes.
Like, okay.
Yes.
And
it's
you
a
obviously don't want
possibility.
that to be anybody's
No.
thoughts about you.
No.
Okay. All right. So you're gonna hold that distress a little bit for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said it's gonna probably go fine, meaning like you think you can carry it through, but it might make you a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I'm hoping I don't slip up.
And start being like, and how are you?
And go, oh, well, I'm sorry that you went through something, like.
And then just completely turn around. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, so we've laid out a couple of expectations. One is, well, I'm sure he'll be fine with giving me the advice, but maybe in his mind he'll be like, whoa, Kyle's being selfish today. Like, didn't even ask about how I am. And then also you might just feel kind of like icky, and then you're afraid that you might like break and just start to like take care of him so you feel better about yourself again.
Exactly.
Okay, so those are the expectations. All right, so then you're gonna do this experiment. So when do you think you can do something like this?
Tomorrow.
Give me a day. Okay, tomorrow. And then what problem do you think you're gonna bring him?
I'll bring him I'm so stressed out. I'm so busy,
Okay,
which is true.
great. So you'll
Yeah.
just talk about that and, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I need help with this.
Yeah,
I
like
need to have some balance.
it's on a level that I've never experienced before.
Okay, great. That's perfect. And then we'll kind of keep it time limited. So how long do you think the conversation will be? Just give me
15 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. And remember, we're not gonna
not
then
gonna
make it another 20 minutes
make it about him, yep.
Okay, awesome. So then we're gonna do this, and we've already talked about the expectations. And after you do it, I want you to do two things. One is I want you to actually ask him at the end of that conversation, was this okay with you that today we just talked about me? I'm just really stressed. You literally ask him that very specific question because you want to get some level of feedback. Of course, he can still lie to you,
Right.
but it at least gives you some semblance of what he might be thinking. And I don't think he's expecting that kind of question from you.
No.
So he'd be like, hey, I gotta run because I'm busy. But just so I know, like, was this okay that I called you just to get your advice today? And we didn't get to talk about how you're doing.
I can do that.
Okay, cool.
I can totally do that.
Awesome. So then he'll give you some feedback about that. You will write that down, and you will write down just your feelings leading up to it. Like, was it that discomforting? And then once you get that feedback from him, how did you feel then? And I will say that what I'm expecting is this guy's been your friend for 10 years, that he's probably gonna be like, dude, it's cool. Like, that's what friends are for, something like that. And then using that experience, we're gonna now go back to your assumptions again and say, did that assumption really hold? I mean, do you always have to take care of people? Or are there at least certain people in your life who you can have a back and forth with? And this is the first step. Then we do another experiment with a different person and a different kind of experiment so that we can loosen these assumptions, make them more conditional, and that will feed back to that core belief, like, is it truly as universal as you think it is? Wow. And that's really going to be the process. So it'll take a few weeks for us to execute it all the way through, but this is the first step. And I think if you can do this first step, it's going to start to shake that assumption enough for the rest of our work.
So you can do it CBT, but there's also something called DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy. And it's a type of talking therapy based on cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's specifically adapted for people who feel emotions very intensively. So the aim is to help you understand, accept your difficult feelings, learn skills to manage them.
I was trained in dialectical behavior therapy, which is the evidence-based treatment for borderline personality disorder, and that has had significant success in relieving distress in a number of people who in the past were seen as untreatable and unworkable. And since this therapy has come out, it has brought hope and help to people who otherwise would have had to struggle with this on their own. So there are 4 main components of dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, and these include an understanding of mindfulness, learning skills for emotional regulation, learning skills of distress tolerance, and learning skills around interpersonal effectiveness. And through learning these skills and working with a DBT therapist, people with borderline personality disorder find significant relief and a sense of structure and stability over something that previously felt really uncontrollable. So the first component of DBT that I mentioned is mindfulness, and this is the idea that we need to be really present, non-judgmental, and aware about our present current circumstances. And this is a very, very important skill for people, for anybody really, but specifically people who struggle with kind of an unstable sense of self and a difficulty with staying kind of grounded and focused in the present moment. The second skill that DBT teaches to people who have borderline personality disorder is emotion regulation. And there's a couple different aspects of this, but essentially it's the idea of learning to be comfortable with and accepting of your emotions, and then learning how to manage difficult emotions so that they don't end up controlling you, but that you have the ability to choose how you react in any given situation, despite what you might be feeling in the moment. Distress tolerance is also a very important skill that's taught to people who are in DBT. Distress tolerance is really this idea of when your situation seems unbearable and intolerable, what are some things that you can do, healthy things that you can do to manage your behavior and your emotions so that you don't do something impulsive or risky that ends up having negative consequences for you down the road. The final component of DBT, which is really helpful for really anyone, is interpersonal effectiveness. And this is just the idea that through learning how to communicate in healthy, respectful ways with others, to assert ourselves and to have really good boundaries, we can then have more stable relationships with others and build trust. And this is so, so important for people who struggle with borderline personality disorder, because trust is one of the things that they have the hardest time with. So interpersonal effectiveness really gives them the skills to start to have better relationships with others.
How you can do it is you can do it through a recognized CBT therapist, or you can use the framework yourself, or you can work with your buddy on this. So therapists' worksheets are available, and there's also one that you can download in the resource sections, putting the thoughts on trial. And you've got to it's introduce the behavioral change now. That's the key thing. Recognize that it takes time to change habits, because you don't want to get deflated with this. You'll fall at the first hurdle because it's going to take time. So you've got to keep on at it every day, chipping away. Tal Ben-Shahar says, chipping away the excess stone. It's like making a sculpture of your new life and chip away the bits that don't serve you anymore. You can use technology, like there's an app called Habit, to set a new habit, and just start small. Just do one habit. Focus on one thing, one time. Ensure that you have a reward and a consequence if you make the mistake, and you maybe go back to the old habits. So here's just to give you an introduction to the types of automatic thinking that we have on autopilot. So it's all or nothing thinking. So it's either this way, either my way, or the highway. That's all or nothing. It's either this way or the other way. There's no in between. That is all or nothing thinking. An overgeneralization, making things, generalizing them. All people are nasty. That's an overgeneralization. You can't say all people, or you might think, just beware when you're using the word always. So and so always says that. Well, always, what is that word? Is it true? Is it always like that? No, because things change all the time. Jump to conclusions, so judgment, assumptions. Oh, so and so didn't invite me to the birthday party because of what I said to her the last time I saw her. Yeah, that's why. Well, no, why have you jumped to that conclusion? You don't know. You're just making it up. Magnification, blowing things out of proportion and minimizing them. So taming them down. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Emotional reasoning, bringing an emotion. Oh, they're angry or they're upset. Da, da, da. Should statements. Oh, you should be wearing a mask. You should be wearing this. You should do this. And you should contact the police. You should do. Notice the word should. How often do you use it in your language, internally and externally? Personalization. So, yeah, taking things to heart. It's all about me. Maladaptive thinking. So, this is the bad way of thinking, not a positive way of thinking. Labeling and mislabeling. So, just putting a label on something. And being overly optimistic. This is another one. Oh, yeah, everything's great. Yeah, it's all great. Yeah. Is it really great? Optimistic thinking, we get led to believe we should be positive all the time, but then it does push away those feelings of sadness and maybe guilt and not facing them. So we have to be aware, just aware of that you're not going to be happy all the time. That's the reality. So here's some of the questions that you can ask. What is the evidence that this thought is true? Is there an alternative explanation? What's the worst thing that can happen? This is a great one for if you worry a lot. What's the worst thing that can happen? Am I worrying excessively? What would a good friend say about the situation? Have I done what I can to control this situation? Is it skillful to hold on to this thought? So now we're going to look at mindfulness as a tool, as this is an essential part of this coaching program. And the reason that it is the essential tool is because if we're not aware of these things, we can't change them. And if we continue doing the same thing, we get the same results. If we change what we do, we get something different. So just take a moment and think about what are your experiences with mindfulness or meditation. You may have some of those experiences or perceptions of what it is, and just think about what they are. And coming back, and you can write them down or share them with someone. You can email me and share them. So my experiences with mindfulness is that I've studied mindfulness for 10 years and I'm still practicing every day, currently doing a meditation every weekday at 8 o'clock, and then on loving kindness. And I've found that to be very powerful because it's opened the heart and it's allowed me to connect with myself and others. It's also provided good insights into why I do what I do. And it promotes curiosity. It promotes investigation. So John Kabat-Zinn came up with the 8-week program, which recognized globally by doctors as a remedy to depression, stress. So mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So we're going to look at dark thoughts.
One of the most challenging parts of meditation is what's sometimes called the dark side of the mind. These are the thoughts and fantasies that we'd rather didn't appear in the mind. Whether they're exciting, violent, vengeful, or maybe even sadistic in nature. We might think we shouldn't be experiencing them. But these thoughts are perfectly natural, and there's obviously no need to act on them. But why do they seem to appear more often once we begin to meditate? Well, typically, we go through our day with quite a heavy filter on the mind, blocking out these thoughts that we don't like, either habitually or intentionally. When we block them out habitually, we're unaware that it's even taking place. We're just so caught up in our day-to-day thinking. But by meditating, we're creating more space in the mind. So it's not that there are more of these thoughts, we just see them more clearly. But when we're blocking them out intentionally, we already see the thoughts clearly, but we're resisting them, perhaps fearful of what they say about us as a person. But what meditation shows us is that we're not our thoughts. So there's no need to judge them, to identify with them. We see that they don't make us a mean person, a terrible person, a twisted person. And it's through this process that we discover peace of mind, allowing thoughts to come and go, at ease with the mind, exactly as it is.
Okay, so Headspace you may have all heard of. It's an app for meditation, which you can try, and highly recommend it. So what this video depicts is that sometimes we have this perception that meditation is that we sit there and we're going to just experience bliss. And it's all going to be very pleasant. Well, yes, sometimes it is. But sometimes we see those dark thoughts. Exactly what you're saying, because we filter them out and we don't focus on them. So they may come up in meditation. So it's important to take this practice seriously and practice with a meditation teacher until you are confident to do it on your own and you're able to ask as many questions Hence the reason why it's integrated in this course. The guided love and kindness meditation and the mindfulness training on a Monday. So there are a number of resources out there that you can start looking at. Lots of audio books. There's the Mindful Monday sessions. You've got the guided meditation in the morning, every weekday at 8 o'clock. And there's the 8-week mindfulness course. You could go and look at that. I mean, some of those courses, I mean, they start from, I think, £150 up to £250 for the 8 weeks. So in terms of what you're getting access to on this course, it's very good value and it's worth just joining in. You can also go to the source of mindfulness, which is actually from Buddha. He introduced mindfulness, and you could study the actual source of it with him. There's plenty of resources online. So here's a quick framework that we can apply to our mindfulness practice and also to our life. So it's, if you remember RAIN, RAIN is the acronym. It's one of the easiest ones to remember. So recognize is the R. So be the observer, just recognize what's going on, then acknowledge it and accept it, that it's there, and then investigate, why is it there? Be curious to find out, and then non-identify with it. So this is the process of letting go and detaching from that original thought. Thich Nhat Hanh, Zen Buddhist monk, he says to think in terms of either pessimism or optimism oversimplifies the truth. The problem is to see reality as it is. So here's the invitation to do the work. Monitor your automatic thoughts. Note the triggers down and what type of thinking's taking place. And there's a worksheet you can download to do this. Start to put your thoughts on trial. Is it true, what I'm thinking? Where did it come from? What's the evidence for this? And then do a mindful practice. So maybe pick something else this week. So perhaps mindful walking, mindful eating, mindful relationships, and just do that mindful practice. Practice 5 minutes a day, meditation. If you're unable to make the meditations in the morning, just do 5 minutes. So we're coming to the end of this module. Any questions, you can email me, or you can join the Facebook group and start discussions in the members area on the forum. Always open to your feedback as we're constantly evolving this course. So please give us some feedback by email. And here's some of the resources for this week. Here's some of the resources available. So you can look at, there's many books out there on it. The apps, the Thought Diary, Headspace app, and Habit, you can look at. And you can look at what a CBT session actually looks like on this link. And there's been lots of studies done actually on CBT and ADHD. So get present to those. Next week's topic is overcoming powerful emotions. Just leave you with this thought from Buddha, or this statement. I thought, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Yes, Gabor Mate picks up on this, is that what Buddha didn't say is that our environment can create our thoughts. Change the environment, change the thoughts. It's our world.